We are live now.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to call our meeting to order for February 26, 2024. Members Sutcliffe and Doucette send their regrets. Before proceeding to the agenda, I want to recognize that Ottawa is located on unceded territory of the Algonquian Anishinaabe Host Nation. The people of the Algonquian Anishinaabe Nation have lived on this territory for millennia. Their culture and presence have nurtured and continue to nurture this land. The Ottawa Police Services Board honors the peoples and the land of the Algonquian Anishinaabe Nation. Today, Ottawa is home to approximately 40,000 First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. Ottawa's Indigenous community is diverse, representing many nations, languages, and customs. The Ottawa Police Services Board honors all First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people and their valuable past and present contributions to this land. We are currently broadcasting on Zoom and live streaming on YouTube. Should we receive any disruptions, I would ask that everyone remain patient as we work to fix the issue and resume the meeting as soon as possible. Prior to this public meeting, we held our in-camera meeting. The board received and discussed the following items: an operational update on major events and demonstrations, Legal Services Report, fourth quarter 2023, Labor Relations Unit Report, fourth quarter 2023, a Labor Relations Matter, and a delay application. Before going to the confirmation of the agenda, and in honor of Black History Month, I would like to take a moment to honor the legacy of Black people in Canada and their communities. The story of African-descended peoples in Canada is a rich and complex one, dating back more than 400 years. The breadth of experiences, narratives, and identities of Black Canadians has been instrumental in shaping the country we know today. The historical presence of Black people in Canada was characterized by colonial settlers oppressing and enslaving people of African descent in this country. But the whole story is not widely known or discussed in this country's dominant historical narrative. By shedding light on the complex histories and lived experiences of the country's many Black populations, we are able to better appreciate the history of how Black people in Canada have surmounted barriers and prospered despite the ongoing struggle against oppression and discrimination. At this time, I would like to call upon community leader, activist, educator, and founder of the Ubuntu Collective, Ms. June Gervin, to say a few words. Ms. Gervin was instrumental in arranging for a number of Ottawa-based institutions and organizations to become signatories to the United Nations Declaration of the Decade of People of African Descent, including the Ottawa Police Services Board. June, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, board members, chief, community. Thank you, Chair, for inviting me to speak at this Black History Month meeting of the board. Thank you for your Ubuntu-inspired invitation to speak on behalf of our shared history, our humanity, our legacy, yours and mine. My history with the Ottawa Police Services go back decades. I take this chance to again honor the members of the services who do not need anti-racism training with my tax dollars. Why? Because they're in very good terms with their own humanity. They bring their humanity to work every day. They function from a place of shared humanity. They can be trusted to serve and protect children, whoever they are, wherever they are, whatever their vulnerabilities, wherever they are. I honor them. I thank them for their service. I offer my gratitude. Gratitude that goes back to when I was a mother of Black children growing up in Ottawa. These members who I honor are de facto members of the Ubuntu Collective, UC Ottawa. Together with like-minded others, we are building an Ubuntu community in Ottawa. On March 21, 2017, Ottawa joined the Orders of Government, Canada, and Ontario in committing to the spirit and intent of the United Nations International Decade for People of African Descent, 2015-2024. The decade has 3 themes: recognition, justice, development, with persons of African descent recognized as a distinct group whose human rights must be promoted and protected. On Monday, October 26, 2020, the Ottawa Police Services Board endorsed the spirit and intent of the decade. This endorsement was on behalf of the chain of command and the rank and file. Over the years, I have learned from the Ottawa Police Services about the legacy of Sir Robert Peel. Sir Robert Peel is memorialized as the father of policing. Over the years, I have increasingly asked, and what about Rose Fortune? Is she not to also be memorialized as the mother of community policing? And the answer is clear, yes, she is the mother of community policing. The motto of Black History Ottawa is legacy worth preserving. Preserving the legacy of Rose Fortune as the mother of community policing is one important way to mark year 10 of the UN Decade for People of African Descent. We want her legacy preserved. Sir Robert Peel played an important role in drafting Britain's 1828 Metropolitan Police Act with the 9 principles of policing, which guides our own Ottawa Police Services. Sir Robert Peel served as Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, Chancellor of the Exchequer, and Home Secretary. Sir Robert Peel was an heir to the British aristocracy. He was heir to intergenerational wealth. His father was a British politician, an Industrial Revolution textile manufacturer. In 1799, he was named one of the 10 known British millionaires. The cotton that created the Peel family wealth was grown by persons like Rose Fortune's family, who were incarcerated and industrialized by the British in prison colonies, persons of African and African European descent held in work camps for the enrichment of Britain. Sir Robert Peel's father opposed the abolition of slavery. Researching police services in Canada, I learned about Rose Fortune. She was a contemporary of Sir Robert Peel. He in Britain, she in Annapolis Royal, Canada. She took on the community role of police officer, a voluntary role. She did unpaid service and protection in the community. This was well before the September 29, 1828 day when the first paid police men appeared in the streets of London. Rose Fortune is known as the first female police officer in Canada. She is likely also the first female police officer in North America, and very likely the first female police officer in the British Empire. With her own capacities and resources, her entrepreneurship, her wheelbarrow, and her community service, Rose Fortune achieved intergenerational economic, social, political, and cultural prominence as a highly respected community builder. Rose Fortune was born in the American slave colonies to an enslaved family. During the American War of Independence, her family signed up as Black loyalists in their bid for freedom. Black loyalists were children of African and African European descent who were incarcerated and industrialized in British work camps in the American colonies. In exchange for pledging loyalty to the British Army, the British Crown offered them freedom. Their names were entered into the Book of Negroes, compiled under the direction of Sir Guy Carleton. They ended up in Nova Scotia. She was 10 years old when she came. Despite all, Rose Fortune's humanity remained intact. She served everyone without social distinctions. Canada has recognized Rose Fortune's legacy. On January 12, 2018, she was named a National Historic Person. On July 20, 2019, the Historic Sites and Monuments Board of Canada installed a plaque commemorating her in Annapolis, Nova Scotia. In Black History Month 2024, we asked the Ottawa Police Services, signatories to the UN Decade for People of African Descent, to have Rose Fortune recognized as a mother of community policing. It is right and fitting to do so. Memorializing Rose Fortune as a mother of community policing is a mighty contribution to the motto of our city, Advance Ottawa, en avant. We in our nation's capital must preserve her legacy. We must do it. We must ask the Ottawa Police to vote that we do. Thank you.
Thank you, June. Thank you for sharing that history. Chief Stubbs, and as board chair, look forward to having that continuous dialogue with you on your request. And I just want to say, I very much appreciate the Ubuntu philosophy. I am because you are. And that really points to connection, community, and caring. And as you so eloquently stated, it's the humanity that we owe to one another. So on this Black History Month, June, thank you very much for coming to the Ottawa Police Services Board, sharing the history, and we look forward to your continuing participation with the board and service, as you've done historically. Thank you. I will now proceed with the confirmation of the agenda. Unfortunately, we have run into a quorum issue for this evening's meeting. With the board's consent, I will be looking to amend this evening's agenda item in terms of our items for business, which begin at number 8 on our agenda. With the exception of item 8.3, update on demonstration activity, I am looking for the board's consent to defer all other items of business until the March 25th meeting. Any time-sensitive items requiring approval can be dealt with via e-polling and reported out at the next meeting. All other parts of the agenda today will still proceed, including public delegations. I would therefore request that the Ottawa Police Services Board confirm the amended agenda of 26 February 2024. Is the amended agenda confirmed?
Confirmed.
Confirmed.
Thank you. Confirmation of minutes will proceed to number item agenda 3, that the Ottawa Police Services Board confirm minutes number 96, number 1 and 2 of 22nd January 2024 meetings. Are the minutes confirmed?
Confirmed.
Thank you. Number 4, committee meetings, reports from committee chairs, and minutes. 4.1, Finance and Audit Committee, draft minutes number 24, 2nd February 2024, and 4.2, Human Resource Committee, draft minutes number 18 of 16th February 2024. In the interest of time, we will forego the verbal updates from the committee chairs. However, the minutes are included as part of the agenda package for anyone interested in reviewing them. If there are no questions or comments from board members, it is recommended that the Ottawa Police Services Board receive this item for information. Is this item received?
Received.
Received.
Thank you. Number 5, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? Thank you. Public delegations, agenda number 6. We have 4 public delegates registered to speak today. When I call your name, you will be able to turn on your mic and video. Each delegate has up to 5 minutes to address the board. I will now proceed with the first registered public delegate, Mr. Robin Brown.
Can you
Thank
hear
you.
me?
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Yes, we can hear you. You have 5 minutes.
Good. I hope I can do this because I'm still in shock from what I just heard, but I'm here to talk about the Ottawa Police Service's use of force reports. And the first thing I want to address is Chief Stubbs' misleading statements regarding why the Ottawa Police are providing use of force stats that include the race of the person the police use force on. Chief Stubbs makes it sound like the police proactively offered to collect and share this data as yet another way to build relationships with the community. They didn't. The province ordered all Ontario police forces to start including race on their use of force reports starting in January 2020. But did the OPS run out and tell everyone about this? Not as far as we know, because we only found out about it in the fall of 2020 and immediately asked the OPS for the data several times. And each time the OPS politely told us that they didn't have it and we'd have to get it from the Ontario Solicitor General. But when we asked the Solicitor General for the data, they told us to ask the OPS because the OPS had it all the time. The OPS released its 2020 data in April 2022, and it showed the OPS was using force disproportionately on Black, Middle Eastern, and Indigenous people. In 2020, the OPS was using force on Black people almost 5 times more than expected. Now, by more than expected, we mean more than expected based on Black people's percentage of the population. So to make it simple, let's say Black people made up 5% of Ottawa's population and white people made up 95%. We would expect 5% of the OPS's use of force to be on Black people and 95% to be on white people if the OPS treated everyone equally. Instead, using this example, it's like the OPS are using force 25% of the time on Black people, and Black folks only make up 5% of the population. In 2021, the OPS used force on Black people 4.3 times more than expected. And in 2022, that number was down to 3.1 times. Now, although we're obviously happy to see the number decreasing, we note that it's not the result of any plan the OPS presented to reduce the number because the OPS hasn't presented a plan, largely because this board hasn't asked them for one. Now, since the OPS released its first 2020 use of force data in April of 2022, the force has presented many plans. It has presented plans on increasing its budget. It has presented plans on its new South facility. And it has presented its plan to stop the theft of expensive cars, but it hasn't presented a plan to stop using force disproportionately on brown people. Why not? Well, because it literally has no plan to stop doing so. And that's a big problem because one of the kinds of force the police can use is shooting and killing people like they did last June after they got 911 calls about a man with a knife having a mental health crisis in the Byward Market. They got the first 911 calls at 2:11 p.m. and responded by shooting and killing the man at 2:14 p.m., 3 minutes after they arrived. The police also have batons they can use, like the one the OPS officer who was convicted of assaulting a man having a mental health crisis used to strike the man twice before stepping on the man's neck for over 2 minutes. You know, the same officer that got a suspended sentence and probation, but no jail time. Abdirahman Abdi, Greg Ritchie, Anthony House, the guy the cops killed last June. What happened to all of them is part of a disturbing pattern of people having mental health crises ending up dead shortly after the police arrive. And this is particularly concerning as the OPS's 2022 use of force data shows that calls relating to mental health, such as apprehensions under the Mental Health Act, were the type of calls most frequently associated with use of force, making up almost a quarter of the calls, or use of force incidents. Sorry. So now some people, including Councillor Curry, would like us to focus on the fact that the data shows the OPS resolves 99.9% of the calls without the use of force. What Councillor Curry doesn't want anyone to focus on is that the OPS's own data from the second quarter of 2023 also shows that OPS officers spend less than 1% of their time responding to priority 1 calls that involve, quote, actual or imminent danger of bodily injury or death, often with a known presence of weapons, unquote. That means OPS officers spend 99% of their time doing things like directing traffic and taking people having mental health crises to the hospital, that is, if they don't shoot them. Are we now expected to applaud the police for not using force on people in traffic or at the hospital? And regarding the use of force, Chief Stubbs says he wants the OPS to work with the affected communities to better understand how the OPS can do better. What he's not saying is that the OPS will start imposing harsh penalties on officers who use force disproportionately on brown people. And I would ask the chief why he's not committed to doing that, but I'm not allowed to ask questions. So let me end by saying it's time to start reimagining community safety by shifting money away from policing to things that actually respect people's human rights and keep us all safer. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Do any board members have any questions for the delegate?
Seeing none.
Thank you, Mr. Brown, for your delegation today. Sorry, the second delegate is Alec Gajanin. Mr. Gajanin, please. Hi, Mr. Gajanin.
Good evening.
Good afternoon. You have 5 minutes, sir.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Alec Gajanin, and I'm here to raise issue with some of the systemic failings related to Ontario's institution of policing and the structures around policing, including police service boards and oversight bodies. That discombobulation has contributed to everything from poor community police relations and mistrust of police to weakening the integrity of our institutions. The first absolute statement I want to make and discuss is that there is a need for greater standardization when it comes to municipal policing. Through my investigative journalism work involving discussions with policing stakeholders and diving into the internal policies across police services in Ontario, there's a recognition that not all internal policies related to policing are drafted and that there are some that have been verbally grandfathered. The following has been said by multiple police stakeholders. Not all internal policies are drafted. Grandfathered policies may be verbal. I need the board to think about that for a second. Try to see if there's anything wrong with that. The second absolute statement is that while the previous provincial government successfully brought in legislation to address the issue of carding, the core of the problem still persists. Let me explain. The issue with the data collected via carding was that it was permanent, secretive, and when officers got things wrong or exaggerated an incident, there was no system in place to challenge information stemming from carding or get it corrected. Those same issues around police narratives persist with general occurrence reports that may end up getting filed and are inconsistent with the actual occurrence of events that transpire. There's a total absence of any process to appeal police narratives, and there are no specific policies within any policing service across Ontario that specifically addresses this issue. If a general occurrence report is investigated and determined not to meet necessary standards, it is likely to go unchanged because it is considered as being closed. And the only way to get rid of these junk reports is through a judicial order. So a judge has to order for it to be destroyed, and it cannot be destroyed because it's the right thing to do. Think about that for a second. The entire process is counterintuitive and evident of low-level thinking that has often plagued our institutions and different levels of government. The third absolute statement is that our institutions have become more politicized and weaker. All three levels of government struggle with this issue, and the fallout can be felt everywhere. The Ministry of the Solicitor General struggles to answer basic questions like, what does the Ontario Police College teach recruits about how to respond when they get police reports wrong? Police service boards are also struggling to live up to their potential because the Police Service Act discriminates against defense lawyers who specialize in policing. Criminal defense lawyers are banned from sitting on police service boards because they clash with lawyers that represent police service boards. If criminal defense lawyers were welcome to sit on police service boards, excuses like the board has no control over police operations would quickly dissipate. But at the same time, serious criminal complaints would never end up getting escalated to the likes of the National Security and Intelligence Committee of Parliamentarians. The last absolute statement is that the biggest issue plaguing the institution of policing and the structures around policing has nothing to do with external or internal factors. It has to do with the shallow and bad thinking that has been in play for a while. It has to do with groups of stakeholders not understanding challenges at their core, structures around these challenges, and the limitations of current policies and how they relate to them. A holistic understanding of the conditions around today's challenges would allow us to build change models that lead towards forward progress and lasting change. Respectfully, that necessary depth of understanding just isn't there for many police stakeholders. And instead, a form of ignorance seems to be getting embraced, a form of ignorance known as gatekeeping. That gatekeeping mindset is what makes our institutions so vulnerable. To conclude, the institution of policing will continue to self-harm itself because its stakeholders don't care for it. They neglect it. They disregard its needs. This will persist until more stakeholders get real about systemic challenges that plague our institutions. The first step in that direction can be taken by this police services board by recognizing that they have power to do far more than they have claimed to be able to do, and by starting to live up to that obligation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Gajanin. Board members with questions. I see Vice Chair Carr. Please.
Hi, thanks very much for your delegation. I'm just wondering if you can expand on a couple of points. Early on, one of your statement was that not all internal policies related to police are drafted. Some are verbally grandfathered. Could you give an example of such a policy?
Certainly. So I'm working on a report that looks into internal policies as they relate to general occurrence reports. Police services call these directives, and ultimately there's a standard that needs to be met, and that standard set by the province. One thing that's come up within these directives is that there's no specific policy that addresses the direct issue of someone choosing to dispute and challenge a general occurrence report and its narrative. So there is no effective process in place. And ultimately, that's one of those verbal grandfathered policies. Nobody has a direct process to say this is how you effectively challenge a narrative issue within an occurrence report. And I also want to make note of an important point. The OIPRD has traditionally been the route that most people have had to take. However, when we consider that the seriousness of complaints that go to the OIPRD, something like a general occurrence report issue is not that serious, and it could probably be solved and resolved without having to go to essentially the provincial oversight board. And I say that because the provincial oversight board, the OIPRD, only has 60 employees, and they regularly get upwards of 5,000 complaints a year. So there's just limited resources, and I think it would be a good starting point to sort of look into this process on how we can do policing a little bit better.
Okay, thanks. I think I'll follow up with the police online on offline on some of that a little bit later. Your last statement was that police boards that they have far more authority, I'm not sure the word you used, than they claim to. And you're speaking directly to the Ottawa Police Services Board, and I'm wondering if you could illustrate that statement a little bit better for us so we understand what it is you're getting at.
Certainly, I would love to do that. So ultimately, when it comes to lawyers, lawyers are meant to represent their clients' interests. So, for example, the police service board, let's say whether it's in Ottawa, whether it's in Toronto, whatever police service board we may be speaking on, their lawyer is meant to protect their interests. So effectively, complaints that might come in or operational issues that may not necessarily be entirely operational issues and outside the purview or powers of a police service board, that sort of advice that's provided by a board's lawyer goes unchallenged, or it doesn't get challenged to the extent that it's necessary. So having a criminal defense lawyer on a board effectively makes decision making better. There's no real reason to discriminate against criminal defense lawyers from sitting on police services boards, because at the end of the day, we're talking about judgment, and we can't make a blanket assumption on someone being a criminal defense lawyer just not being able to sit on a police service board. That's just bad thinking.
Okay, thank you for that. Chair, I'm going to get you to speak to where that comes from, that the rules that we cannot have on our police board.
Sorry,
Yeah,
go
I was
ahead.
actually asking a clarification question on the last point of the delegation, but I think we went back to the third point of the delegation. But it's common across all police boards, is it not?
I believe so. And do we have legal counsel available? Do we have
we can follow
our
up
legal services? Yeah, we can follow up, but my understanding is there is, and the delegate may be able to expand on it too. There's a provision that says certain members are, I see our legal counsel is coming on. She can give a clear answer. Ms. Sims, please.
Yes, good afternoon, Mr. Chair. It comes from a provision of the Police Services Act, and there is coming into force a new act, which I'd have to double check, but I believe it's expanding to exclude not just defense counsel, but also crown attorneys from eligibility to sit on a board.
Thank you very much for that clarification, and thank you very much for your delegation today.
Thank you all, and I wish you well. Bye-bye.
Just before you go, any other questions from board members? If not, thank you very much. Sorry. Okay, we'll go to Delegate 3, Councillor David Hill.
Hello, good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead, Councillor Hill.
Perfect. Thank you very much. On February 8th, I had the opportunity to represent the City of Ottawa as Deputy Mayor alongside of Chief Stubbs at the National Summit on Combating Auto Theft. I'd like to take a moment to update this board on the outcomes from that summit. It was encouraging to see so many Canadian leaders, both in government and business, come together to review what an all-of-Canada solution to auto thefts could look like. As an aside, it was great to see firsthand the high regard Chief Stubbs is held by his colleagues across the country as we met with other attendees. As a first step, I believe the Anti-Theft Summit had value in identifying the scope of the problems that we face. Several funding and policy announcements from the federal government have since come out, including $9.1 million in additional funding for grants to provincial and municipal police forces through the contribution program to combat serious and organized crime, $28 million to the Canadian Border Agency to increase the agency's ability to detect and secure stolen vehicles at our ports, changes to regulations and work with industry to ban devices that are used to gain remote keyless entry to vehicles, requiring industry to take anti-theft security more seriously by updating the Canadian motor vehicle safety standards to address technological advancements in motor vehicle theft, and legislative updates to the criminal code to increase the legal consequences for stealing vehicles. In particular, I hope this board is able to take advantage of the grant opportunities presented by the federal government to bolster our own anti-theft resources. I was disappointed, however, by the larger strategy and the significant funds required to make that strategy a reality, to end the surge in organized crime and auto theft, and to address the bigger problem of reduced policing in our cities. What both the summit and its subsequent funding announcements made clear to me is that we cannot defer to the federal government or international companies to take ownership on this issue. Immediate action and leadership are needed here locally. This is not just a car theft issue. This lack of resources to support our police in all aspects of their work. I just spoke at the Human Trafficking Conference this week here in Ottawa, where I learned that our city has triple the national average number of cases of human trafficking. It's unacceptable, and it speaks to how many different communities in our city, well, they need more police presence, not less. Local governments across North America have stalled the growth of police budgets, or in some cases made cuts. In Ottawa, these budget pressures have resulted in the loss of needed policing resources, such as our Vehicle Theft Task Force. In this moment, when we need police more than ever, it's become harder to recruit officers, let alone have the budgets to pay for them. It's clear from the Workforce Management fourth quarter report that you're reviewing today that we also need greater support from upper levels of government, starting with increased capacity at the Ontario Police College so that your recruitment efforts aren't stymied by provincial capacity. As a city councillor, I'll help you with the funding question. I know I'm not alone in that pursuit. I appreciate the leadership that our mayor and this board have taken on the issue, and I will also support your advocacy to the provincial government to remove roadblocks to the hiring of new officers. Our OPS keep us safe despite working in some of the most challenging environments and with constant threats to their own personal safety. The 3-year staff stabilization strategy that Chief Stubbs presented at the last budget is the necessary first step to getting police resources that our suburbs and our city needs. I'm committed to working with my council colleagues, starting with the mayor and our 2 council police board representatives, to ensure that the board has the funding necessary to make the chief's plan a reality and to keep our city safe. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Councillor Hill. Any questions from board members? If not, I would offer an opportunity for Chief Stubbs, who is also at the Auto Theft Conference, if he has any highlights from participation in that conference.
Thank you, Chair Fakarani and Councillor Hill. Thank you for coming with us to that event. I have similar comments to Councillor Hill. It was impressive the amount of people in that room, different levels of government from across the country, different police agencies from across the country, as well as industry, insurance companies, and whatnot. So there's no doubt that this issue has got the attention of everybody, and everyone realizes that this is something that has to get addressed aggressively. The path to success is, and the frustration that Councillor Hill expressed in his delegation is one that I think we all feel, that we want to do more, we can do more. The team that is working on this issue, led by Deputy Ferguson in Ottawa, they are working hard in a number of different areas to try to thwart this epidemic in Ottawa. I know on the front lines, Deputy Burnett, I would say every second morning I wake up to a briefing note where our team has identified a stolen car, attempting to leave town, and attempts to stop it, and a lot of times are successful. But the real issue is 2 things. One is the technology that these folks these thieves are using to get these cars, and that the aggressiveness to defeat that technology is key. And secondly, the organized crime that is driving this epidemic need to be targeted and dealt with. And we know, based on when we're stopping these vehicles and we're arresting younger people from age 14 to 21, 22, 23, a lot of them from out of province, that they're being paid to come in here and do that. So while we're arresting and charging people, it's not the right people. They are stealing the vehicles, but we need the top of the org chart dealt with. And that plan needs to be, that's a largely police-led, along with partners like CBSA, and that work is starting as well too. But that broader strategy, where all tentacles, insurance, industry, police, government, all levels of government are in the right direction with their area of influence, still needs to occur.
Thank you, Chief Stubbs. Thank you, Councillor Hill, for your delegation today, and for previous delegations as well. We will now go to our 4th delegate, Mr. Paul Champ.
Thank you, Mr.
Hi,
Chair.
Mr. Champ.
Yes.
Thank you for joining us today. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair and board members, chief and deputy chiefs. I want to thank you all for this opportunity to address you today on what I believe is a very serious policing matter that is impacting on the exercise of democratic rights and freedoms on the public streets of Ottawa, And just as seriously, I believe is damaging our civic culture in Ottawa and our trust in our local police service. Many of you may know me as the lawyer who's acting for and representing downtown residents and businesses and workers against the convoy protesters for their activities 2 years ago. But I should let you know it's a very strange position for me to be in, to be bringing a case against protesters, because for over 15 years, I have been working on and advising organizations and others on civil liberties and protest issues. I've been a board member of the BC Civil Liberties Association for over 15 years. I've addressed parliamentary standing committees on protest issues. I've been consulted by the UN Special Rapporteur on freedom of association on protest issues, traveling to UN events in Kenya and in Chile. And I also attended a consultation in Washington, D.C. for the Office of Democratic Institutions and Human Rights, where there was actually a police officer from Ottawa Police at that event, that small workshop where we were talking about principles governing and policing of protests. And what I would like to speak to is, what has happened over the past couple of years in Ottawa, and in particular about how, I believe the convoy has left a mark on our city. And one of them is that I believe the Ottawa Police Service now appears to struggle over how to police protests on our streets. Whereas with the convoy, there was serious under-policing. Unfortunately, I would suggest we are now seeing an overreaction with egregious over-policing of what I would describe as classic protest activities on Ottawa streets. Let's start with some basic principles. First of all, and most importantly, protests and demonstrations are inherently good activities in free and democratic societies. They are protected by Section 2 of the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms and the aspects of freedom of expression, freedom of association, and freedom of peaceful assembly. And I will paraphrase the Supreme Court of Canada here on some of our seminal cases on free expression, but these freedoms are guaranteed by our charter to ensure that everyone can manifest their thoughts, their opinions, their beliefs on a whole range of issues, however unpopular or distasteful or contrary to the mainstream. And we say that such protection is fundamental in a free, pluralistic, democratic society because it's not just for the individual in terms of their self-fulfillment, but it's also contributing to society and the community for our development of new ideas of how we govern ourselves. The next important point is that public streets are the primary venue for protests, and protest activities on streets must be protected as such. This has been repeated many times by courts across the country, and it's recognized that streets are not just for vehicles, they are for protests. That is what their function is. The Supreme Court of Canada has affirmed that many times. In addition, protests can be loud and disruptive at times. And the use of megaphones at protest has been recognized by the Ontario Court of Appeal as part of, quote unquote, the long tradition of civic protest. So where should authorities draw the line, you may ask? Well, guided by law, I would say. And I can tell you, I'm sure that my presentation here today is going to make its way to social media, and I'm going to get a barrage of attacks from some of these convoy folks saying that, I'm being a hypocrite here. But I think it is pretty clear if you look at it. There's a balance of reasonableness, taking into account the level of disruption, the location of the disruption, and the duration of the disruption that takes place. The Supreme Court of Canada has recognized that those living in urban neighborhoods cannot expect to be free from noises and disruption in those spaces, and that includes protests. I see I got 20 seconds left. I just want to speak on behalf of my neighbors in downtown Ottawa that we recognize and embrace that our city is a site of national protests of all kinds, but marching down a street for 2 to 3 hours with a megaphone, that's classic protest activity. It's a moving protest. Obviously, that is much different than 400 semi-trucks that take up streets for 3 weeks and are using ear-splitting train horns. I think we can all understand that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Champ. appreciate your comments and your delegation to the board. You come with a great deal of experience, as you noted in your introductory remarks, and the citizens of Ottawa are aware of that. I see two members with questions. We'll start with Vice Chair Carr.
Thanks, Chair, and thank you, Mr. Champ, for your delegation. I don't think you'll get any disagreement from board members on the fact that the right to protest is a fundamental one, and the understanding it can be disruptive. We certainly hear regularly from residents and community groups and city councilors actually with varying views on this, but I think I can safely say that all of us board members are committed to ensuring that policing at protest gatherings or major events is indeed rights aware and proportionate and intelligent led. And also, you know, reassure you that we are, I did read your delegation beforehand. I don't think you had time to complete the whole thing. But reassure you, we are, you know, aware of our responsibilities and stemming from the recently released audit on the convoy response, we will be reviewing policy on major events and any related policies, which would include those in our board policy manual with respect to public order units. And that includes, of course, police action at labor disputes. And you mentioned also, you know, that we're in the national capital, and I think we're particularly cognizant of that. Tonight, we're going to have a demonstration update from the Ottawa Police Services on demonstrations, including the recent ones, and have an opportunity to clarify some of the policing aspects of those. And you mentioned there were two things I picked up on: the use of streets and megaphones were two of your. I just want to make sure that we capture any other concerns that you have in the presentation and able to ask questions. Is there anything else other than megaphones and the use of streets that are more specific examples than what you were able to cover?
No, Madam Chair, Vice Chair. Those are the main points. Is that those are the basic things: taking up street space, using megaphones. Those are classic protest activities, and giving tickets to labor leaders or protesters. It's a bit corrosive to our civic culture right now, and our great traditions of protest in the city of Ottawa.
Okay, great. Thanks for that, and I think we'll cover that in the presentation tonight. But thanks for making time to come and speak to us.
Thank you, Vice Chair Carr. I know Member Henschel had his hand up earlier.
Looks like he might be frozen.
Frozen. Let's just hopefully he'll be able to get on quickly.
No, I think it's been covered by Vice Chair Carr's.
Okay, thanks, Member Henschel. Mr. Champ, the question I have for you is, you stated it's a balance of reasonableness, and you have to take into account levels of disruption and duration. Where would you put in like public safety de-escalation principles and discretion by police services in such incidents? And I'm assuming they're all factors to be considered.
100%. I mean, the situation that the Ottawa police faced at the beginning of the Freedom Convoy, I've actually spoken about that in other contexts where I think that the police were trying to enhance and facilitate protest activities by allowing the trucks to come through downtown Ottawa. And we have had a history of vehicle-based protests through Ottawa, whether it was farmers or whatnot, and they'd drive through and, for a couple hours and leave. And there's no question that I think that the Ottawa Police Service, within a couple of days, once they tried to do enforcement activities, it was dangerous for the police. Anyone could see that. Anyone walking downtown and seeing the Ottawa police and they're being yelled at by protesters and so forth, that's a challenge. But then the question is, well, what kind of preparation do the police have for those kinds of issues? We do know, like in the context of strikes, Mr. Chair, Section 102 of the Courts of Justice Act speak to labor disputes and about policing and the balance of policing and when there should be injunctions. And so I'm saying it's inherent in our law. We recognize there's going to be disputes. We recognize there's going to be issues, and sometimes where the police will take a more restrained pose because of the public safety circumstances. But that doesn't mean that we start like giving tickets to people because they're on a street. What you do is you take a step back and you shut down the street, because that's where people are supposed to be protesting.
Thank you, Mr. Champ. Any other questions or comments from board members right now? Okay, thank you, and we do hope, Mr. Champ, that you will continue to delegate at these board meetings. We know there's that you will face some criticism from different sources in Twitter, as you said earlier.
I resisted. Just don't let the legacy of the convoy be suppressing our right of protest in Ottawa. You know, discouraging and suppressing protests, that's not what we should be doing here. We should be embracing and celebrating protests. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Champ. We will now, that concludes the delegations for today. And just want to thank all those who registered to speak. We're going to go now to inquiries, as number 7 on our agenda. Are there any inquiries? Great. So we have now limited our agenda, our amended agenda, to only include 8.3, and that's the update on demonstration activity. We felt it was very important to keep this board meeting despite some issues with quorum. We really wanted to hear the presentation from the Ottawa Police Services on the demonstration activity. So Chief, I understand you have a presentation on this item, so I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be addressing our response to ongoing demonstrations and some recent confusion and criticism that has been circulating in the media. I have a team here that is going to do a presentation, but I'll make a few comments here. And first, I want to speak to the residents and businesses who live and operate in the downtown core. We understand how important our response to demonstrations matters to your lives, and we are always evaluating and adapting our response. This is the capital of Canada, and as Mr. Champ just said, we have a lot of protests. But it is also your neighborhood, and we will continue to review and improve our response. My comments and the upcoming presentation is just one example of us striving to be transparent and open to feedback. I'll start by commenting on the general major event protest environment in Ottawa. We are seeing an unprecedented level of demonstrations in Ottawa for a variety of causes. Along with a high operational demand on our team, these events are more complex and require more resources that would typically be deployed in the past. To name just a few in the past year, many convoy-related demonstrations, visits from President Biden and Zelensky, PSAC strikes, various 2S LGBTQIA+ protests, Canada Day, and ongoing events related to the Middle East conflict. Along with this, many and daily smaller protests that still require a significant effort to manage. Regardless of their size, we have been able to maintain safety and order in all of them. And don't forget, this is also in addition to the various community events such as Santa Claus parades, fun runs, Memorial Day weekend, and Panda games that we have to resource. In every event, we work to maintain public safety and to ensure demonstrators have the ability to exercise their charter rights. It's a very difficult balance and complex work for our members and partners. We are always making adjustments, dealing with new variables, changing our strategies, and determining when it is safe to enforce or exercise our discretion. I think this is a key point. It is rare that everyone is satisfied with police during these types of events. Some demonstrators are upset with any police presence and refuse to listen to us. The public is frustrated when we are forced to close roads and drivers are sitting in their cars for a long period of time. Understandably, businesses and residents don't want to be disrupted or hear noise. While we do receive thanks and praise for our efforts, it is common to hear complaints from parts of the community. It's just difficult to please everyone. That's our reality. I do want to take a moment to recognize the sacrifices our officers make when working during these sometimes very difficult events and in a challenging environment. This includes long hours and the unpredictable nature of their duties. They take a lot of verbal abuse and sometimes physical abuse from some, and I'll be clear, from some of the protesters. It's ridiculous, the language and comments I've personally heard coming from some of these people. Despite that, our members have demonstrated remarkable skills and dedication to public safety. This extends to both our sworn officers and civilian staff whose contributions are invaluable. I'll now turn my attention to the Family Day weekend and the events on Saturday, February 17th. During the day, our officers managed multiple overlapping events. This included a convoy-related event and pro-Palestinian protests with multiple marches. There were some issues resulting from that weekend that we will address during our presentation in a few minutes, but I'll mention them briefly right now. First, we did deploy a significant amount of police presence for the convoy demonstration to ensure vehicle-based protests would not enter the downtown core. We also worked to keep demonstrators away from Winterlude and other events. Last week, there were reports that we have a double standard or are sympathetic to the convoy movement and focused our enforcement on the Palestinian marches. This is simply not true. We have managed numerous convoy protests in the last 2 years, with a high number of charges being issued. Since February 22, over 40 charges against this group is evidence of that. During the Family Day weekend protest, the police issued 9 provincial offense notices under the Highway Traffic Act that also included excessive noise, as well as 1 vehicle towed. If you listen to the verbal abuse our officers receive from the convoy protests, you'll understand their disdain for our presence at their events. I'll be clear, we respect their rights to lawfully protest, but they are no fans of the Ottawa Police Service. During that weekend, there was also an adjacent but unrelated and peaceful pro-Palestinian protest that we monitored to ensure safety, blocking roads, and directing traffic. There were no charges issued during this event. In the past few weeks, we have had ongoing and positive discussions with their community leaders and believe we have made progress in managing those marches. Simply, we remain a neutral agency during protests with a goal of a safe, peaceful, and legal event, period. I want to clarify some confusion as it relates to our work with bylaw services. First, we have a very positive and collaborative working relationship with their team on the ground, as well as with their director, Roger Chapman. Last week, there was some miscommunication and misinterpretation of what occurred. I take responsibility for the police messaging that stated during the Family Day weekend, and I'll quote, "Police and bylaw officers issued multiple violations to participants," close quote. Among the charges that were issued, there were 2 bylaw charges, and there were assumptions that they were issued by the bylaw services, when in fact, it was the Ottawa Police Service. So that is the confusion and the miscommunication between our 2 agencies. In regards to comments that we inform bylaw services not to issue any charges, this is not accurate. It's important to state here that they are their own agency and will make those decisions themselves or in collaboration with police. However, this narrative is being drawn from what I'll refer to as the fireworks incident on the Saturday night during the Family Day weekend. In the evening, our patrol officers responded to reports of noise and fireworks. And I'll note here that this incident occurred hours after the demonstration had ended and our deployment was complete. So upon attendance, there were no fireworks being deployed and thus no charges were issued as the individual who set off the fireworks wasn't identified. The tension and angst from the protest group was elevated when bylaw services attended the scene. We requested bylaw services to leave the area in an effort to de-escalate the situation. As such, they did not issue any tickets and left the area. This is a decision made on the ground to avoid potential violence, and I will not second guess it. The OPS did not instruct bylaw services to not write tickets during the weekend, but simply to leave that particular situation. The remaining OPS officers ensured demonstrators understood the boundaries of lawful behavior, and they stopped this activity. While there were reports of some noise after officers left, there were no significant events that night. However, bylaw does inform that they have an open investigation on the fireworks incident. The Family Day weekend events came and went without major policing issues. It was a safe event. But as I mentioned earlier, it wasn't perfect. These events rarely are. For example, I heard frustrations from residents that live in the area during my meeting last week with the Ottawa People's Commission. They were frustrated by the noise, as well as the lack of timely communication with them. we are going to work with the OPC and get better. I heard from councillors, from board members, and read some media. I and the team are listening. I will say that my sample size of 15 months in Ottawa informs me that our members are working extremely hard. Our processes are not broken, but we can always do better and improve. Our service remains committed to ensuring safety during the numerous protests in the city. Thank you, Chair. And that concludes my remarks. And I would like to turn it over to Deputy Chief Paul Burnett and his team who have a short presentation for the board.
Thank you, Deputy Chief Burnett.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you. Chair, Board, thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today about demonstrations, which continue to be a major issue in Ottawa, both in volume and number of resources needed to ensure public safety. There are an unprecedented number of demonstrations occurring in our city, and we are still dealing with convoy-related events to this very day. We want to address concerns we're hearing about specific incidents and a perception of bias in our response to some of these demonstrations. The presentation we have for you today will cover a number of events: context and challenges in managing these events, the mission, the role of police, types of major events, operational resources, public order deployment. We'll give you a high level on costs, neutrality and safety, outreach and community engagement, events on Family Day weekend, and how we inform the public and how we collaborate with our city partners. Next slide, please. Managing demonstration is one of the many functions that we have as police officers. As the chief has indicated, we are seeing a higher number of these types of public protests. First, I want to credit the officers that manage these demonstrations on a sometimes daily basis. We have a dedicated and strong expertise in this area, which we continue to build. As we plan for these demonstrations, we have the community top of mind. The ongoing daily local demonstrations span different cultures, and with the diversity of people come diversity of issues. At times, these demonstrations are spontaneous and fluid and pose operation and resource challenges as we aim to maintain public safety and order. Every city in Ontario deals with this, and I would say across the country. Ottawa's demonstrations have been relatively peaceful, with limited breaches in municipal bylaw and a select few incidents of obstructions and mischief. Although the vast majority of demonstrators are peaceful and lawful, we have seen an escalation of behavior that is concerning. We've been able to manage this with our engagement with the community and organizers. It's our role as police officers to uphold community safety, enforce the law, and allow for lawful demonstrations. I'm going to turn it over to Superintendent Francois Dow and Acting Inspector Julie Mann. Frank?
Thank you, Deputy Chief Burnett. The Ottawa Police Service is committed to upholding public safety, neutrality, and the right to peaceful assembly. Recognizing the concerns of various groups, we prioritize approaching every event with impartiality, professionalism, and a dedication to ensuring a safe environment for all. The role of police. Our officers, guided by common law and statutes like the Ontario Police Services Act and the Criminal Code of Canada, bear sworn duty to preserve peace, prevent offenses, enforce laws, protect property, and preserve life. Our main objectives during demonstrations are to maintain public order, preserve peace, and remain neutral where possible and facilitate the building of trust between participants, police, and the community. We have to ensure safety and security of the public and emergency service personnel, all while minimizing disruptions for Ottawa residents, businesses, and visitors. The police liaison teams, part of the Ottawa Police's response to events such as demonstrations, protests, rallies, marches, vigils, and labor disputes, is crucial for maintaining contact and building relationships with event organizers, ensuring effective communication and collaboration. Police liaison teams work with individuals or groups to facilitate peaceful events and is an excellent resource for those planning or organizing, attending an event. Over the past 12 months, our dedicated members, along with city, provincial, and federal partners, have managed a myriad of events. As you can see, we continuously prepare for planned events such as parades, sporting events and concerts, demonstrations, and must also be steadfast to respond to unplanned incidents such as tornadoes, derechos, flooding, or other significant weather-related events we've all experienced. The unpredictability of pop-up events continues to strain Ottawa Police Service resources. This dynamic landscape necessitates a nimble and adaptive approach to event management. For events large and small, we deploy a range of resources, including neighborhood response teams, traffic officers, police liaison teams, and public order officers, to name but a few. This includes collaboration with the City of Ottawa Traffic Services, paramedic, and fire service partners. Our intelligence-driven planning allows us to minimize disruptions for non-participants, especially in terms of traffic management. Ongoing information sharing with internal and external partners ensures a well-coordinated response. In particular, traffic management during recent demonstrations has been very effective thanks to the great work of officers previously mentioned with the assistance of the City of Ottawa Traffic Services. Road closures have been brief, and we've managed to ensure emergency routes are not affected by the temporary closures. We are constantly assessing intelligence, and we remain committed to the safety and well-being of our residents. We remain vigilant to all threats and acts of hate, and we encourage anyone who witnesses or experiences such incidents to report them to police. Police resources must be in place with scalable operational plans for each of these events. Next slide is an example of public order deployments. Public order units are teams of officers deployed to specifically manage large or potentially challenging crowds. To provide some additional context into the increase of demonstrations we've seen in Ottawa, this is a brief summary of only public order unit deployments related to demonstrations since 2015. Public order unit deployments have seen a significant 610% increase in the last 3 years, with already 12 deployments year to date, 2024. This notable surge underscores the evolving nature of demonstrations in the City of Ottawa. This slide represents only a sample of the major events the Ottawa Police Service has managed in 2023. I'll preface this slide by advising that some of the totals you'll see do not factor in regular on-duty deployment costs, time for planning and preparation, and other costs associated with major events, such as fleet and logistic services. As you can see, the total costs are significant strain on our resources, both financially and physically, and often require additional police support from partnering law enforcement services, such as the Ontario Provincial Police, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, and other municipal police services from across Ontario. Maintaining a neutral stance amid diverse concerns, we face the complex challenge of balancing various issues during demonstrations. ensuring safety is paramount, and our officers receive training in de-escalation, active bystander, anti-Black racism, and Indigenous awareness, to name but a few workshops. Specialized teams, including police liaison, neighborhood resource, and community police officers, are proficient in managing tensions during demonstrations and are adept in fostering community engagement and cooperation. Establishing open communication and dialogue with residents and businesses is crucial for understanding everyone's rights and responsibilities. Regular meetings with demonstration organizers facilitate ongoing evaluation of tactics and policing strategies. We are grateful for the feedback from these engagements, which contribute to the consideration for changes in practices and reflecting our commitment to continuous improvement. We continuously reassess on a weekly basis our proactive measures and our responsive actions to ensure the safety of the public, the participants in demonstrations, and ensuring that laws are being enforced fairly and without bias. At this time, I'll now ask Acting Inspector Julie Mann to speak to the next slide.
Good afternoon, everyone. As the chief already mentioned, we had two separate demonstrations that were scheduled for the Saturday of the family long weekend. And I happened to be the incident commander that was working on the Saturday to manage both demonstration, as well as several other resources that were deployed to support both events. The day went very well, all in all. And at approximately 5:30 p.m., the crowds dispersed on Parliament Hill, and most officers that were assigned were demobilized at the time. Shortly thereafter, just after 6 p.m., the Ottawa Police received a call for service regarding a disturbance at the intersection of Kent and Queen Street, which is the parking lot located immediately beside the Red Pepper on Queen Street. Officers also received information regarding fireworks being deployed at that location. Ottawa Police responded, our frontline officers attended and spoke to the protesters, the convoy folks that were there on scene, and did not observe any fireworks deployed when they were present. However, they did have conversations with the protesters regarding keeping the noise down, as well as reminding them regarding the fireworks, the use of the fireworks. Bylaw services attended as well, and when they arrived, the crowd became agitated, at which point they were requested to leave. Ottawa Police also, several officers left the area and determined that it was the best way to address the crowd at the time. Shortly thereafter, we obviously did not receive any more complaints, and police, most of the officers left the area, leaving a few officers to keep an eye on the crowd. That's basically what took place the night of the Saturday of the family weekend. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. Keeping the public informed. Strong coordination of communications with the City of Ottawa, bylaw, transit services, Intersect, and other partners allow us to inform the public promptly about potential impacts during events. Our goal is to inform the public as soon as the information is made available to us in terms of traffic disruptions and temporary road closures. While challenges do exist due to unplanned events and in finalizing March routes, our commitment to improving communications involves timely updates through social media, news releases, and regular briefings to key stakeholders.
Superintendent Dow, sorry to
Continuing our
interrupt.
commitment to enhancing our response to major events, the
Sorry,
Integrated Event Command Table, or IECT, established following the 2022 convoy demonstration, facilitates collaboration amongst municipal, provincial, and federal partners. This structured approach aims to promote effective communication, information sharing, and coordination, ensuring a cohesive and well-integrated response to events occurring in the City of Ottawa.
Superintendent Dow, sorry to interrupt.
I'll turn it back over to Deputy Chief Burnett for the conclusion before taking any questions.
Thank you, Frank. In closing, we are unwavering in our commitment to safety, neutrality, and transparency as we manage these events. We are continuously working closely with our city partners and policing partners to ensure any enforcement is done equitably and based on behavior, not bias. We debrief on these events to learn and update, and we share regular updates on these activities with the board. We continue to adjust our response, and community feedback is vital to the decision-making process as we improve operations and increase public trust. Every event we manage has objectives, and we aim for them to be safe. And what does safe look like? Minimal disruptions to the community, little to no concern of public safety. People have been able to demonstrate and exercise their Charter of Rights in a peaceful and lawful way. We've been fair, using discretion with enforcement. Plans are in place to ensure everyone's safety and there are no injuries. Thank you for your attention this afternoon. We're happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you for that presentation and for the introductory remarks.
Thank you, Deputy Burnett. Chair Fakarani, back to you and any questions from the board.
Great, thank you very much. Can you guys hear me? Okay, perfect. So I will, I see Vice Chair Carr has her hand up. I will turn it over to her. And just remember, we've got time limitations. So if we can have the questions and responses in a short period, that would be great. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. I'll try to go really quickly. So just a few questions. Thanks for the presentation. I know with respect to communications that occurred on the Family Day weekend between Bylaw and Police, Ottawa Police Services, you know, there was conflicting information that was sent out. What are we going to do going forward on an improved communications protocol to avoid this in the future? Has there been any discussion on that?
Thank you, Vice Chair Carr. Yes, there has, as a matter of fact, and interesting, you know, what CTV News has actually published an article where they're quoting me and Director Chapman speaking about that particular issue, about lessons learned about that, the communications that go out. And as I articulated in my comments, we made some assumptions that, you know, Bylaw Services were working with us. We worked with them on the weekend, and they often are writing the noise tickets, and assumptions were made that in fact occurred, and that was an error. So we've now, even last week when we were communicating with the media, we ran our statement past them prior to issuing it. So I would say that's actioning the lessons learned from a week earlier.
Yeah, considering you both have the power to issue tickets, I think it's really important that there's communications on what tickets were issued, who issued them, and what they were for. It's really important. And on that question, can you, with respect to issuing tickets in a street, I think the specific charge is disruption on a highway or whatever else, can you highlight when a ticket is issued for disruption on a street? And as well, I know that I don't believe Police Services has issued tickets for megaphone use. I believe that's Bylaw Services, but I know that you work together. Can you confirm under what circumstances a ticket would be issued if you were to issue one on the megaphone? So on both the highway and the megaphone. Recognizing that Bylaw, I believe, has been issuing most of the tickets on megaphone.
Right. So Vice Chair, could you repeat your first question there? I didn't quite understand your first question. I got your second question.
Okay, just with respect to the streets, I know that we've issued some tickets at protests with respect to, is it disrupting on a highway, interference with use of a highway? There's a specific charge. Can you let me know when that would be issued?
Okay, good. I'm going to go to Superintendent Daou to answer some of those questions. Frank.
Thank you, Chief, and thank you, Member Carr, for your question. We work closely with bylaw regulatory services. We work side by side for most demonstrations, particularly the weekly pro-Palestinian demonstration and convoy demonstrations. And the offense notices that you had mentioned are specifically based on noise amplification devices, I believe. It's not disruption, but it's the bylaw in regards to noise amplification devices. And just to speak to the warnings that we have given to the groups. In 2020, since 2022, bylaw had issued 270 warnings in regards to noise violations pertaining to this bylaw. This is to all groups. So we have a scalable approach to these enforcement actions. We've issued hundreds of warnings to organizers, to demonstrators about the specific infractions. And we have, supported bylaw in the issuing of these offense notices. There is often some discretion depending on the safety of the situation and the cooperation of the participants. But from what I can advise is that in the last 3 weekends of demonstrations for pro-Palestinian demonstrators, there have been no bylaw offenses being issued. So we have a coordinated approach with bylaw services, and we have to ensure that if the offense notices are issued, it's safe to do so. We're not creating more issues than we need to. So we do have discretion. Bylaw Services has discretion as well, and will support their operations throughout the demonstrations.
Vice Chair Carr, I see your hand is still up. Do you have follow-up or
Yeah,
additional questions?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify. It's not just simply the use of a megaphone, though, or like to clarify under the circumstances under which it would be, that fine would be issued.
We just had a bit of an audio issue there where we didn't get most of that question, Vice Chair. Could you repeat it again, please?
Yeah, I guess I was just looking for specifics with respect to, megaphones are issued all the time. We've had a higher incidence of ticketing recently. I realize that it's bylaw issuing the tickets, but if there was any, specifics that could be offered as to why a charge would or would not be issued. Is it the prolonged use? Is it, when that noise violation comes into play?
Okay, thank you. Some of the things that have been focused on in recent weeks is ensuring that if a megaphone, for example, is being used, that there's no profanity that's being spoken about, no hate crime. There's been instances where megaphones have been brought, directly to a bylaw or police officer's, face or head, or very close to that person, and there's yelling through it. So there's certain situations where if it does continue, then that is something that would elicit an enforcement response. So that's what the focus has been in recent weeks, to find that middle ground of allowing, similar to what Mr. Champ is talking about, but managing the noise a little bit more closely. And I just see Deputy Burnett has put his hand up. Paul, I'll go to you for more details there.
And Councillor, I will say this: there is a lot of conversation that takes place ahead of these demonstrations with our PLT and the organizers, and a sort of laying of the ground rules is really established. Sometimes what we run into is we have people that perhaps don't align with what the organizers are demonstrating, and that sort of ramps up and elicits the crowd. So we do have people going into those crowds and sort of going against the original agreement that the organizers would have discussed with our PLT.
And that is a common problem where, you know, there's people that want to cause issues, and it could be one person, could be 5 or 10 people that go into a crowd of 400 or 500 and have a different agenda than a peaceful, let's just say a very peaceful march, pro-Palestinian march. And if some people go in there and disrupt that whole march, it can happen. And we're now trying to manage these few people amongst a big group of people. So it's a challenge.
Okay, excellent. Do we have time to quickly speak about the highway charge? And as well, like when you would have a charge issued because of the highway, and then just you know, I'm cognizant of the time. So if you could answer that, that'd be great.
Okay, and specifically the highway charge, could you just expand a bit on what you're looking for?
I can't remember exactly the wording. Unfortunately, I should have looked it up, but I'm aware that one of the charges that can be laid is disrupting a highway or disrupting one of the provincial offenses that has been laid by the police in police or bylaw in recent weeks. I'll look up the exact wording. With respect to interfering in a highway. No, did I get that wrong? Sorry.
Vice Chair, I'll go to Superintendent Daoud that I think can maybe help you with some of that wording and get to where you want to be, Frank.
Thanks, Chief. Thanks, Member Carr, for your question. In regards to the charge that you are referencing, it's a criminal code charge of blocking a highway, which includes intimidation. So what we would lay these charges if demonstrators would block a highway or a roadway in general. The highway definition is a roadway under the Ontario Highway Traffic Act, and refuse to move. Therefore, they're blocking the roadway, they're blocking an emergency route, and they're failing to remove themselves. Now, in these cases of the demonstrations, although there is a blocking of a roadway throughout the marches, the disruptions are fairly brief. They're very controlled by our NRTs, our public order units, our traffic units, and we're able to coordinate with the demonstrators who provide us with the route direction shortly before starting, so that we're able to plan, albeit with limited amount of time, but we're able to plan the route and the safety of the demonstrators and members of the public. Now, although they are technically blocking the highway, the blockage is fairly brief, and we ensure that the emergency routes are open should there be a need to for paramedics or fire services to move through the demonstration. So we are exercising our flexibility, and you know, cooperating with the organizers to make sure that that the march goes smoothly. And I feel that there is some give and take, and I think we're at the right position now where there's cooperation on both sides, and we accept that you know, the roadway is temporarily blocked for these marches, as Mr. Champ had mentioned prior.
Okay, thank you. I'll turn it over to someone else to speak, but appreciate the fact that we recognize the improved communications that needs to happen, both within organizations, but also with the public. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Any other questions from board members? If not, I'm going to suggest that the recommendation that the Ottawa Police Service Board receive this item for information. Is the item received?
Received.
Thank you. And I thank you, Chief Stubbs and your entire team for the presentation. I think it was timely, it was needed. And we're very pleased that we could proceed, given the time limitations, with at least this presentation today. So thank you to you and your entire team. Do any board members have any other business? Sorry, Vice Chair Carr, your hand is still up. Not sure if that's legacy. Okay. Any other business? If not, this concludes our public meeting. Our next meeting will be held on March 25th. Can I please have a motion for adjournment? I see Vice Chair Carr, motion for adjournment. Thank you. This concludes our meeting. Thanks, everyone. Thank you for your